So obviously off the back of this incredible World Cup that he's had, so very similar to the goalkeeper, I suppose. Uh, there's been even more and more clubs linked with him. There's stories in England now that Manchester United and Manchester City have been placing bids for him, and they join a kind of growing list of clubs that have kind of been relentlessly chasing him for at least 12 months now. I think Chelsea are perhaps the most obvious ones. Manchester City have been interested from the start. I know that for a fact, but not nearly as interested as Chelsea have been. So I think this is also just another kind of, whip around of attention and drama to an extent. Like, oh wow, he's done so well at World Cup. Let's link him to a bunch of important clubs. And unlike the goalkeeper at Croatia, of course, Gvardiol's a player who already proved himself at RB Leipzig over and over again, really, for the last 12, 18 months or so. And yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what happens in January. I think the really important thing here to consider is that, Leipzig very rarely sell players unless it's on their own terms. And if it's not on their own terms, it's usually if a player's contract is expiring or if a club basically offer above and beyond what the player's worth. So, Konrad Laimer will be leaving because his contract's expiring, but, they're not exactly going to move on anyone unless they really want to. And I think something that might also play against any hopes that Gvardiol could move to the Premier League is that it looks more and more increasingly likely that Christopher Nkunku will move. Maybe not in January, but potentially move at the end of the season as well. And I suspect that Leipzig might be inclined to avoid any prospect of their two biggest stars being announced as future departures in the same month. So I don't think Leipzig are under any pressure to sell him. Having spoke to people close to the player and the reporting I've done for Transfermarkt, I'm not really under any impression that he's desperate to move either. He certainly appreciates the attention. I think he has every intention of playing at a higher level, playing in the Premier League at some point in his career. But he also strikes me as quite a smart guy, and it's that kind of old kind of football manager thing. He's delighted to see the attention in him, but he's not exactly kicking down the doors at Leipzig saying that he wants to move and he'll never get another opportunity to play for Manchester City or Chelsea again. So I'd basically say I'd kind of pour some cold water over these reports and just kind of wait and see what happens in January.
Yeah, I've heard from sources close to the matter that Leipzig are very unlikely to sell him in 2023 and that there's no exit clause. So, as you suggested, like that would mean the price would be very high in the player, right? But also Leipzig have no intention of selling the guy because they don't need the money. Their future is actually quite well handled, even though the passing of Mateschitz, the owner, may have ripped. Some thought that may have ripped a hole into their budget. That's simply not the case, also they will make a sizable amount of money by selling Nkunku. So there's just simply no need for them to actually get even more money, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they also need to build the squad. There is some, I forgot the name of the Croatian kid that has been linked to them also playing with Dinamo Zagreb, because they have some sort of deal with Dinamo where they scout the club quite heavily. And there's been some names linked to a possible Gvardiol replacement. Unfortunately, I don't have the name in front of me, and because I'm on a trip, I don't have a second screen. But the Dinamo Zagreb, this Dinamo Zagreb defender is supposed to be really good, and if you go by it, the suggestion is that they might be able to sign him and actually have him sort of as an understudy. Or
would it be Josip Sutalo?
I think that's him.
Yeah, well, I conveniently have Transfermarkt open in front of me. He's worth 18 million euros, 22 years old.
That's him.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking that. It's kind of hard when you don't have a second screen. Anyhow, the idea was.
Wow, isn't Transfermarkt such a handy and useful tool?
Yeah, really is. It has everything in it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was him. 18 million euros, centre back, right? Yeah, it was Sutalo. bang on.
Yeah.
So
So
there was
that's a really interesting point actually, because I would say the difference between Nkunku moving on, which now seems inevitable, and Guardiola maybe being forced to wait another year, is that, as we've talked about in the show in the past, Leipzig already have Nkunku replacements in place. They've already got
yeah
a number of attacking players at the club. They've got more already set to join in January, if I'm not mistaken, if not the end of the year. And although, of course, Nkunku is their best attacking player, they have the strength and depth to replace him. That's not really the case with Guardiola. If Guardiola was to leave in January, it would really leave Leipzig with a huge hole in defence. So that's another reason why I'd be very sceptical of any idea of him moving on in January. And as you said, potentially even in the summer, because if Leipzig were to sign someone like this Sutalo kid, they'd probably want him at the club for a full season before they sell.
yeah yeah that was sort of the idea. I remember like too that the way they developed Guardiola was really interesting too, because they had him parked at Dynamo and then essentially paid Dynamo. Like, Dynamo was able to hit certain bonuses every time Gvardiol played a certain amount of games for Dynamo. So essentially, Leipzig paid Dynamo for playing him, and there was some really interesting undertones to the story that Leipzig have some sort of agreement in place with Dynamo to develop certain players. And remember, Dani Olmo came through there as well, right? And so, yeah, it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. But I was told with some certainty that Guardiola will not be sold in the summer.
Yeah. Only thing I really want to add to this is that, from what I've been told, is much like the Nkunku deal, where there was no official release clause, there was basically an agreement made between the club and the player and his representatives that they've got a value that they value him at. They'll be happy to sell him at that certain price, and that's what's happened with Nkunku. It would seem that Chelsea have met that, and I suspect that's what would happen with Guardiola in about 12 months' time. And that's why he signed a new contract, before the new season. That's worth remembering. So, yeah, I think, we don't want to be kind of pessimistic to anyone who's listening to this and happens to be a Manchester United or Chelsea or Man City fan. But, yeah, I would, at this point in time, I'd probably pour some cold water over this rumour, to be honest with you.
Oh, those clubs will certainly try. Also, Man City don't need Guardiola. They got Manuel Akanji.
Let's not go down in a kanji rabbit hole.